The first cold breath of the Hardanger high moorland reaches you as snowmelt loosens from the pale slopes, and tonight we follow that quiet water across the stone. Settle in, and let your breathing take the same slow pace. You are not climbing here, or hurrying over the upland. You are simply arriving, as the snow begins to soften. Around you the Hardanger high moorland lies broad and open, lifted high above the fjords, where the air has the clean mineral smell of wet rock, old ice, and low plants pressed close to the ground. The light is gentle and grey-blue, moving through cloud as if it has traveled a long way to reach this place. We begin near the lingering snowfields, where winter does not leave all at once. It thins slowly. It loosens grain by grain, becoming water before it becomes motion, and you can almost hear that change in the small ticking beneath the crust. A drop gathers under the snow. Another follows. Then a narrow thread of meltwater slips over a dark stone, clear as glass, and the whole moorland seems to listen. The Hardanger high moorland is shaped by this kind of patience, not by one flood, and not by one season, but by countless springs returning after long winters, each one laying a soft hand on the land. Snow rests here for months. It settles into hollows, lies against boulders, fills shallow basins, and hides the older shapes beneath a smooth white cover. Then, when the sun rises higher and the air begins to loosen, the hidden land is revealed again, damp and shining. You can feel the coolness close to your face. It is not sharp, it is clean and quiet. The wind moves low across the open ground, bringing the faint scent of moss, lichen, and water traveling over stone. If you listen, there is no single stream at first, only many little sounds. The small trickle under snow, the soft drip from a ledge, the muted rush where water has found a groove in the bedrock. We follow one of those grooves now. It begins so modestly that you might step over it without noticing. A clear line of water slides between tufts of grass and dark cushions of moss, carrying a few loosened grains of sand. It curves around a stone because the stone has waited there longer than the stream has existed. Then the stream returns year after year, and the curve becomes a habit in the land. This is one of the ways snowmelt works here. It repeats itself. It comes with the same season, over the same slopes, through the same hollows, and the hard surface of the moorland slowly learns the pattern. Water enters tiny cracks in the rock. When the cold returns, it freezes and widens them. When warmth comes again, meltwater slips through the widened spaces, carrying fine particles away. Nothing seems dramatic, yet the land remembers every winter. As you move with the water, the ground under you feels uneven in a quiet, ancient way. There are low ridges, shallow basins, stone-strewn flats, and soft wet patches where your steps would sink if you were walking. The Hardanger high moorland is not smooth like a field. It is a lifted, weathered surface, made gentle by time but never made simple. Snowmelt has traced its small decisions everywhere. In the hollows, the snow lingers longest. These sheltered places hold the cold, and when the thaw finally reaches them, water gathers in a slow, silvery seep. The plants there are low and patient. Mosses drink from the saturated ground. Dwarf shrubs spread their small leaves close to warmth stored in the soil. Pale lichens cling to stone, softening its color without covering its age. You notice how everything stays near the earth. There is comfort in that closeness. Out here, life does not need height to be complete. It keeps low because the wind is long, because winter is familiar, because the brief growing season is precious. You can imagine resting here beside the meltwater, with the sky wide above you and the wet stone cool beneath your hand. Nothing asks you to rise quickly. The whole moorland seems to be breathing slowly. The stream widens as we follow it. Other threads join from snowbanks tucked into the slope, and the water takes on a clearer voice. It runs over polished rock, then disappears into a patch of moss, then emerges again, colder than before. Snowmelt often moves this way across the Hardanger high moorland, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden, always finding lower ground by the smallest available path. Over many seasons, these paths become channels. Some remain narrow and bright, shallow enough to show every pebble beneath them. Some deepen into little cuts where the current can carry sand, silt, and the loosened products of frost. The water does not need to rush to shape the place. It only needs to return, and return, and return, with the steady memory of gravity inside it. You may notice the stones along the stream bed. Some are rounded, turned by movement until their edges have softened. Others are angular, freshly loosened by freezing and thawing, waiting for some future melt season to shift them. In clear water, their colors become deeper. Gray turns blue, brown turns amber. A black stone gleams like it has been quietly polished in the dark. Above us, a bank of snow is pulling back from the slope. Its edge is not a straight line. It is scalloped and thin, undercut by meltwater moving beneath it. Where the snow lifts from the earth, you can see a small hidden world being uncovered. Flattened grasses, dark wet soil, last year's leaves, and the first pale green beginning again. The smell there is rich and cold, like spring held under a blanket. This melting edge matters. For months, the snow protects the ground beneath it from the full force of wind and cold. Then it becomes water, and the same sheltering cover turns into a slow source of moisture. Plants near these snowbeds live by that rhythm. They wake late, grow quickly, and remain close to the ground, trusting the brief season to give them enough light before the white returns. We stay beside the water as the slope grows softer. The channel spreads into a wet meadow, where the current loses its narrow shape and becomes many shining lines. Your eye can follow them through sedges and moss, across dark peat and shallow pools. This is another face of snowmelt on the Hardanger high moorland. Not cutting, not carving, but soaking, feeding and keeping the upland damp long after the snow has vanished from sight. Wet ground changes how a landscape sounds. The footfall you imagine is muffled. The air feels closer. Water trembles under mats of moss, and tiny bubbles rise where the soil releases what it has held through the cold months. There is a faint earthy scent here, clean and deep, with a trace of iron and old vegetation. The moorland is awake, but quietly. Peat can form in places like this when wet conditions slow the decay of plant matter. Each season adds a little more growth, and each cold, saturated year preserves a little more of what came before. It is not a fast archive. It is a slow, dark book, written in moss, sedge, root and water. Snowmelt helps keep that book damp enough to remain. You can think of the high moorland as a place where water pauses. It arrives from snow, gathers in hollows, fills tarns, feeds streams, and seeps through moss before moving onward. Some of it will eventually descend toward valleys and fjords, but up here for a while, it lingers. It brightens the stones. It cools the air. It gives the land its reflective inward feeling. A little farther on, the wet meadow opens into a shallow lake. The surface is dark and still, with pale sky resting on it. Around the edge, snowmelt enters in delicate streams, spreading faint ripples that move outward and fade before they reach the far shore. You can hear the hush of water meeting water, a sound so soft it almost becomes part of the silence. Many lakes and tarns on high moorlands occupy hollows left or deepened by ice, weathering and long erosion. Snowmelt keeps them filled through spring and early summer. It carries fine mineral grains from the slopes, and these settle slowly through the water. The lake receives them without hurry. Grain by grain, season by season, the basin gathers a quiet record of the land around it. At the edge, the water is clear enough to show stones beneath the surface. They lie in a faint amber light, softened by depth. You can picture your hand hovering above them, feeling the chill rising from the lake without needing to touch it. The cold here is not empty. It is full of distance, full of winter, full of the long path from snow to still water. Small life moves in these margins. Insects skim or rest. Larvae shelter among submerged plants. Birds may pass over the open upland, their calls thinned by space, but even when life appears, it does not break the quiet. It belongs to the quiet. The Hardanger high moorland holds its creatures in a wide, spare way, giving them water, low cover, and the long light of northern spring. We remain with the lake for a while. Sleep can settle easily in a place like this, where nothing has to happen quickly. The water accepts the sky, the shore accepts the water, the snow retreats at its own pace, and the moorland receives each change without complaint. You can let your thoughts do the same, loosening and flowing into whatever hollow is ready to hold them. Beyond the lake, the ground rises gently again. Snow lies in streaks across the slope, bright against the darker moor. Meltwater falls from each streak in thin, braided paths. Some streams meet. Some vanish under stones. Some spread into shining films over the bedrock, so shallow they seem more like light than water. We follow them upward for a moment, not to climb with effort, but to understand where the water began. The surface here has been shaped by cold as much as by flow. Freeze and thaw can move soil downslope in slow pulses, especially where the upper layer softens above frozen ground or saturated earth. Stones can sort themselves into subtle patterns. Fine material can settle between larger fragments. The result is a landscape with small textures everywhere, quiet signs of motion too slow for the eye to witness. You may see stone stripes on a slope, or patches where larger rocks gather apart from finer soil. These patterns are not decorations. They are the trace of repeated freezing, thawing, swelling, settling, and melting. Snowmelt adds water to the process, and water gives cold a way to enter deeply. Then the seasons take turns, each one shaping without needing to be seen. There is something restful about processes too slow to watch. They take the burden away from the present moment. You do not need to understand the whole history at once. You can feel it in the uneven ground, in the cold stream touching the stones, in the snowbank shrinking quietly under cloud. The Hardanger high moorland becomes legible through small sensations. The air here is thinner and clearer than the valleys below. It carries fewer scents, so each one feels distinct. Wet lichen, thawing soil, stone washed clean, and the faint green breath of plants beginning again. The wind passes over the open ground in long strokes. It does not hurry the water. It only touches the surface of pools and moves on. As we continue across the moorland, the water gathers itself again and begins to descend. The channel ahead is broader now, cut into a shallow fold between low rises. Snowmelt has chosen this route often enough to make it visible from a distance, a darker line through pale grasses and grey stone. We follow it gently, as if the stream were a quiet path laid out for sleep. The stream's movement is steady, but not forceful. It slides over ledges in clear sheets. It curls behind stones. It murmurs through narrow places where the bedrock guides it. In spring, when snowmelt is strongest, such streams can carry more water, but even then the work is rhythmic rather than hurried. The land lowers the water little by little. You can sense how upland water becomes valley water. It begins as a drop under snow, then a thread, then a runnel, then a stream with a voice. Farther below, beyond where we are resting our attention, it may join larger rivers and descend toward the Hardanger fjord country. But here on the high moorland, it is still intimate. You can hear its edges. The stream bed is a narrow world. Moss grows where spray keeps the stones damp. Tiny plants root in pockets of fine sediment. Insects shelter in the slower margins. Even the rocks seem arranged by long listening, each one turned enough to let water pass. This is not emptiness. It is a quiet abundance, held low and close. We pause beside a place where the stream crosses bare stone. The water spreads thinly over the rock, making every shallow groove visible. These grooves may have begun as weaknesses, joints, or small irregularities in the surface. Meltwater uses them, enlarges them, and returns to them. It does not invent the land from nothing. It collaborates with what is already there. That is one of the gentlest truths of snowmelt. It follows, and by following it changes. It accepts the slope, the crack, the hollow, the stone in its way, and over long time those acceptances become forms. The Hardanger high moorland is full of such quiet agreements. Water and cold, rock and moss, gravity and season, each shaping the other without noise. Your breathing can follow that pattern now. In like water gathering under snow, out like a stream finding its channel. Nothing needs to be forced. The moorland is wide enough for every slow thought, and the sound of meltwater is steady enough to carry them away without taking you with it too quickly. Farther down, the stream enters a small basin where several channels meet. The ground is darker here, more saturated, and the water moves through a woven pattern of pools and narrow runs. Snowmelt from different slopes arrives with slightly different temperatures, different mineral traces, and different speeds. They blend without ceremony. The basin simply receives them. These meeting places can be rich in small ecological ways. Moisture remains longer. Fine sediment settles. Plants find shelter in the slight protection of the hollow. Where water spreads, roots can drink. Where water slows, organic matter can gather. The whole basin becomes a soft pause in the larger movement downslope. You can feel that pause in the body. The shoulders loosen, the jaw softens, the mind stops looking for the next thing. Around us, the moorland is still open and treeless, with the horizon lying low and far away. Clouds move slowly across the light. The water keeps speaking in a language made of contact, stone, and slope. The Hardanger high moorland has known many versions of cold. Snowfields come and go. Frost enters the soil. Ice has shaped the broader land in earlier times, smoothing, scouring, and leaving hollows where water now rests. Snowmelt belongs to that long cold history, but it is the tender part, the part that returns as liquid, shining under the muted sky. In this way, the landscape is both ancient and seasonal. Its bedrock holds deep time, while its surface changes with each spring. A snowbank withdraws by a few handbreadths. A stream shifts a little sand. A moss bed swells with water. A lake receives another thin veil of mineral dust. The changes are small enough to soothe the mind, and real enough to matter. We move on only as the water moves on. The basin narrows at its lower edge, and the gathered meltwater leaves through a shallow outlet. It slips between stones with a darker, cooler sound. The air in this little passage feels damp against the skin, and the smell of moss grows stronger where the stream has kept the ground wet. Here the slope begins to guide everything. Water that lingered above now lengthens into motion. It does not hurry, but it has direction. The channel bends around a low rise, then follows a line of weakness in the rock. Snowmelt has found this passage for so many seasons that the land seems to lean toward it. Along the banks, the plants are still small. Dwarf willow, grasses, sedges, and mosses cling to the wet margins. Their roots help hold the soil where they can, while the stream takes what is loose enough to carry. This is a delicate balance. The plants slow the water feeds the plants. Together they make a softer edge between stone and flow. You may notice the color of the water shifting with depth. In the shallows it is nearly invisible. In pools it turns tea-dark or slate blue, depending on the sky and the sediments below. A cloud passes overhead and the surface dims. Then a pale opening returns, and every ripple carries light again. Even on land, the moorland has a watery way of changing brightness. The quiet here is not the absence of sound. It is the blending of sounds that do not ask for attention. Water over stone, wind in low plants, a distant bird crossing the open air, the soft settling of thawed ground. When you listen this way, the Hardanger high moorland feels less like a place you visit and more like a place that continues around you. We are following the snowmelt deeper into the shape of the land. Though the word deeper here does not mean down into darkness. It means down into time. It means noticing how every pool and channel belongs to a long sequence of winters and springs. It means letting the surface become enough. The smallest stream can carry the memory of a whole plateau. The outlet stream moves toward another open stretch, where the ground flattens and the water spreads again. Ahead, the light lies low on wet stone, and the air seems to cool as evening gathers over the upland. We keep with the water, slower now, letting it guide us into the next quiet hollow where snow once rested and where the land is still listening to the melt. The next hollow receives the stream so quietly that, For a while, it seems less like water arriving than light changing its mind. You see the surface first, a low gleam among the mosses, and then the small moving lines feeding it from the slope above. The water pauses here, spreading thinly across saturated ground before it gathers itself again. On the Hardanger high moorland, these pauses are part of the journey, as important as every channel and fall. The basin is shallow, but it holds a feeling of depth. It is deep in the way a memory can be deep, when the same season returns so many times that it leaves a softness in the land. You can smell thawed peat and cold mineral water, and the scent seems to rise slowly, as if the earth has been holding its breath through winter. The sky above is pale and wide, the water below keeps it close. When snowmelt enters a basin like this, it gives up some of what it carries. Fine grains settle first where the current weakens, making thin layers that may remain after the surface dries. Small fragments of plant matter drift into the quieter margins. Over years, the basin becomes slightly fuller, not in any dramatic way, but by accepting what the meltwater lays down. You can think of it as a bed made slowly for moss. We stay low beside the wet ground, where the plants form a close textured world. Mosses swell with water, and their green is darker where the melt has only just passed. Sedges lift narrow blades into the cold air. Tiny leaves catch beads of water that shine briefly before they slip down into the roots. Nothing here grows tall, and yet nothing feels unfinished. The Hardanger high moorland teaches a kind of smallness that is not lacking. You begin to notice the life that stays near your hand, the life that does not need to rise above the wind. If you were lying here, wrapped in the slow evening, you would see whole forests of moss at the scale of your breath. You would hear the stream beyond them, softened by distance and peat. As the water leaves the basin, it divides around a low ridge of stones. One branch is clear and quick, moving over exposed rock. The other slips through saturated moss, almost hidden, audible only as a faint trembling under the green. Both belong to the same snowfield above us. Both will rejoin lower down. For now, they show us how many choices water can make without ever seeming restless. The visible stream runs over rock that has been opened by cold. Water entering cracks freezes when winter returns, and as it expands, it presses against the stone from within. The pressure is not like a blow, it is patient and repeating, and over many seasons it loosens grains, flakes, and larger pieces. Then spring comes, and snowmelt carries what has been freed. You can see those freed fragments in the stream bed. Some are sharp-edged, still new to movement. Some have been rolled until they fit more comfortably against each other. The water threads between them with a clear, glassy sound, and every little collision is softened by the volume of the current. It is a workshop without urgency. It is a song made from restraint. The hidden branch has a different voice. It passes beneath moss and through peat, where the sound becomes low and almost private. If you kneel beside it, you might hear a cool murmur below the surface, as though the land itself were speaking in sleep. This is still snowmelt, shaping the Hardanger high moorland, not by cutting stone, but by keeping the ground wet enough to move slowly, settle, and hold. Wet soil can creep when it is saturated and seasonally thawed. On gentle slopes, the upper layer may shift by tiny amounts, especially after freezing and melting have loosened it. You would not see the movement happen. You would only notice its long results in rounded banks, softened edges, and low lobes of soil that seem to have flowed without ever becoming liquid. The landscape is quiet, but it is not still. We follow the two branches until they meet again below the ridge. Their waters mix without any mark of reunion, and the channel widens by a little. Ahead, the ground falls toward a broad open flat where old melt paths cross each other, like faint lines on a palm. The wind moves over the flat in a slow sheet, and you can feel the temperature fall as cloud thickens across the sun. The flat is not empty. It has been arranged by seasons. Shallow channels braid through it, each one active at different times depending on how much snow remains above, how fast the thaw comes, and how much rain joins the melt. Some channels carry water now, others are damp scars, filled with fine sediment and small plants. You walk beside them in your mind, and they seem to remember water even when they are dry. In a place like the Hardanger high moorland, snowmelt does not arrive evenly. South-facing patches may release early. Shaded hollows may hold snow late into the mild season. A sudden warm spell can send water across the flats in bright threads. A cooler week can quiet everything again. The land receives these pulses, and the channels are shaped by both abundance and pause. You notice the stones set into the flat. Some are half buried, their upper faces pale with lichen. Some sit proud of the surface, as though placed there by a careful hand, though they are the result of frost, ice, gravity, and time. Around them, water divides and rejoins. Small eddies form in the lee of each stone, and fine grains settle there, making delicate shadows on the stream bed. The light becomes softer now, not dark, not yet, but diffused by cloud until the whole moorland seems to glow from within its own greys and greens. Wet rock catches that light and returns it quietly. A pool holds the sky in a darker tone. Moss brightens where water has rinsed it clean. You can feel the day lowering its voice. There is a calm in watching water sort the land. Faster water can carry coarser grains. Slower water leaves them behind. In the stillest places, fine silt settles from suspension, giving the bottom a smooth, muted surface. These simple rules are enough to make patterns, if they are repeated through enough seasons. The Hardanger high moorland is full of such patterns, written gently in sediment. You do not need to name every feature to feel it. The body understands slope and flow before the mind explains them. Your breathing slows when the stream slows. Your attention spreads when the water spreads. When a channel narrows and the sound grows clearer, some part of you follows that brightness, and then loosens again as the current enters a pool. The land guides the rhythm without asking. At the far side of the flat, the stream passes beneath a bank where snow remains in a shaded fold. The snow is old now, dense and granular, its surface dulled by wind-blown dust and tiny fragments of vegetation. Along its lower edge, meltwater runs out in a thin, dark line. It is colder than the open stream. You can feel that cold before touching it. Snow that lasts late into the season shapes the ground around it differently from snow that disappears early. Its melt keeps the soil damp and cool, while other areas begin to warm. Plants here may bloom later, or remain smaller, or take advantage of a brief delayed flush of moisture. The border of the snowbed becomes a moving threshold. Each year, the timing changes slightly, and the living edge adjusts. We linger at that edge. There is something tender about the place where snow becomes water and water becomes habitat. The sound is close and soft, with drops falling from the underside of the snow into a shallow runnel below. The smell is clean, almost absent, then suddenly earthy where the retreating snow has uncovered dark ground. Your own thoughts can retreat like that, uncovering only what is quiet enough to remain. The snowbank also protects stones from the full reach of wind for much of the year. Beneath it, moisture stays close, temperature changes are moderated, and the ground wakes in its own time. When the snow pulls back, the exposed surface looks newly revealed, though it has been waiting all along. This is one of the moorland's gentlest illusions. What seems new is often simply uncovered. We move on as the meltwater leaves the snowbed and enters the larger channel. The stream grows clearer with the added cold, and its sound brightens a little over the stones. The Hardanger high moorland opens again before us, broad and level in places, then rising into low swells. Far away, the darker line of another slope rests under cloud. Everything feels spacious, but never empty. The open ground lets you see how water connects distant parts of the moor. A snow patch on one rise feeds a trickle that joins a stream in the flat. A hidden seep from peat enters from the side. A small lake receives them both and sends water onward through another outlet. From above, the pattern might look like delicate veins, but from here, beside the water, each connection is slow and audible. Hydrology is sometimes spoken of in exact terms, But here it can feel like listening. Water stores in snow, in soil, in lakes, in moss, and in the small spaces between stones. Then it releases according to warmth, slope, saturation, and weather. The process is physical, but its pace feels almost musical. A long winter holds the note. Spring lets it resonate. You can picture the winter version of this same place. The channels are muted under snow. The pools are sealed by ice. The mosses are pressed into darkness, and the stones are locked in cold. Then, gradually, the sun returns with a higher arc, and the first liquid movement begins below the white surface. The moorland does not wake all at once. It wakes from underneath. That underneath waking matters. Meltwater often travels beneath snow before it appears in open air. It follows the contact between snow and ground, finding small hollows and hidden channels. By the time you see it at the edge of a snowbank, it has already made a journey in the dim space below. There is a secretiveness to this, a softness that belongs perfectly to the Hardanger high moorland. The stream now enters a zone of scattered boulders. They sit across the slope like slow thoughts, dark with moisture on their lower sides and pale with lichen on top. Some may have been left by old ice, or loosened from nearby rock, and moved only a little by frost and gravity. Snow collects around them in winter. In spring, meltwater curls around their bases. Around each boulder, the thaw has its own small climate. Snow may last in the shadowed lee, while sunlight opens the ground nearby. Water runs along the stone, then drips into the soil below. Moss grows thick where moisture persists. Tiny sheltered pockets form, protected from the harshest wind. You begin to see how a single stone can create a neighborhood. We pass close to one large boulder, and the air beside it feels cooler. A thread of water slides from a remaining cap of snow down the rock face into a little basin dark with moss. The sound is a patient tapping. The stone smells faintly mineral and wet, like rain on old pavement, though there is no road here. Only the long open moor and the memory of ice. Boulders slow water, scatter it, and make it eddy. Where flow is diverted, some places erode a little more, while others collect sediment. Over many melt seasons, the ground around a boulder can become subtly shaped by these small differences. Nothing is isolated. Even the stillest object participates in the movement around it. The Hardanger high moorland is made of such quiet participation. As we move through the boulder field, the stream splits into narrow channels again. One runs directly over a rock step, falling in a thin, clear veil. Another disappears beneath stones and reappears lower down, colder and quieter. The sound of water becomes layered, some of it near, some hidden, some carried by wind from farther away. You can let those layers settle over you. The hidden water is especially soothing. You cannot see it, but you know it is there, moving through the spaces under stones, rinsing fine grains, finding its way by touch. The mind does something similar at the edge of sleep. It lets visible thoughts fade and continues its own quiet movement underneath. The moorland gives that permission without saying anything. Below the boulders, the ground tilts toward a larger stream. We hear it before we see it, not as a roar, but as a fuller murmur gathered from many small sources. Snowmelt from the surrounding slopes has joined here, and the channel has enough water to hold a continuous voice. The banks are still low, the current is still clear, but the place feels more connected to the whole plateau. The larger stream shows the cumulative work of thaw. Each snow patch above contributes a little. Each seep adds a little. Each wet basin releases what it has stored. By the time they meet, the water carries the shape of a wide area inside it. It is not only a stream, it is a season made visible, moving through the Hardanger high moorland in one cool, shining body. We stand beside it in the mind's quiet, and the sensory world becomes simple. Cold air on the face, damp stone under the palm, the smell of lichen and wet moss, the sound of current over uneven rock, pale light moving on the water. These things are enough. They are more than enough when the day has been long and the body is ready to lower itself into rest. The stream bed here is cut slightly deeper into the moorland surface. Not a canyon, not a dramatic gorge, just a shallow incision where repeated flow has given the channel form. During strong melt, the water may rise and cover stones that are now dry at the edges. During quieter times, it withdraws into the central run. The banks remember both levels. You can see that memory in lines of flattened vegetation, in small deposits of sand caught behind stones, and in the different textures along the bank. The lower edge is washed and bare in places. Higher up, moss and grasses hold the soil together. The stream expands and contracts through the season, breathing with snow, weather, and temperature. We breathe with it for a while. Snowmelt is also a carrier of cold. When it enters streams and lakes, it keeps temperatures low, especially early in the season. Cold water holds oxygen well, and many small aquatic organisms are adapted to that clarity and chill. Their world is narrow, often hidden beneath the surface, but it is alive with fine movements. The quietest water can still be busy. You might imagine tiny larvae clinging to stones where the current is strongest, shaped for holding on without effort. Others shelter in calmer margins, feeding on fine organic matter brought by the flow. Algae grow where light reaches the stream bed. The whole community follows the timing of snowmelt, because the melt controls temperature, flow, disturbance, and food. Even the smallest lives listen to the thaw. The Hardanger high moorland seems sparse at first glance, but that is only because it asks you to slow down. Once you do, details come forward. A ripple bends around a submerged pebble. A moss stem holds a clear bead of water. A lichen patch forms pale islands on dark stone. A bird call passes once through the distance and leaves the silence deeper than before. We continue downstream, keeping the pace of someone who is not trying to arrive. The channel curves along a shallow valley between rounded rises. These forms may owe part of their shape to older ice and long weathering, but snowmelt now lives within them every year. It traces the inherited contours. It freshens them. It carries the season through an ancient template. In some places, the banks show small undercuts where water has removed fine material beneath roots and mats of vegetation. The edges lean over the stream, soft but firm. During high melt, the current reaches these banks and takes a little more. During lower flow, the exposed roots dry slightly and hold. The channel is always negotiating its width, gently and repeatedly. You can hear the negotiation in the changing sound. Where the stream narrows, the water becomes brighter. Where it widens, the voice spreads and lowers. Where it meets a stone step, the surface breaks into small white threads, then smooths again into a dark run. None of it startles you. It is all part of the same downward sentence. The sky above the Hardanger high moorland begins to open in a thin place. A pale band of light reaches the wet ground, and suddenly the stream carries silver along its bends. The surrounding slopes remain muted, but the water glows. Snow patches in the distance answer with a dull white brightness. For a moment, the whole moor seems to be made of water in different forms. Snow, stream, pool, bog, lake, cloud, and mist are not separate stories here. They are phases of the same slow movement. Water rises, falls, freezes, rests, melts, flows, and settles. The high moorland gives each phase a place to stay for a while. You can feel why the landscape seems calm. It is not resisting change, it is holding change gently. We leave the larger stream for a moment and follow a side seep into a quieter patch of ground. The water emerges from beneath a mossy bank, so clear that you see the dark opening before you see the movement. It spreads across fine gravel and enters a shallow pool rimmed with sedges. The sound is almost absent, more a cooling of the air than a stream. Groundwater and snowmelt can mingle in these places. Meltwater soaks into porous soil and fractured rock, then reappears downslope where the ground allows it. This delayed release keeps some places wet after surface snow has gone. It smooths the season's pulse, making water available more steadily. The moorland is shaped not only by what runs over it, but by what passes through it. You can sense the difference in the seep's temperature and steadiness. It feels constant, shaded, protected from the sudden changes of sun and wind. The pool it feeds has a glassy surface, with only the faintest trembling where water enters. A small insect rests at the edge. A moss fringe darkens where it drinks. The world narrows to a few careful details. This is a good place to let the body become heavy. The pool does not ask you to follow it quickly. It receives the seep, holds the reflection of a cloud, and lets overflow slip through a notch in the moss. Your thoughts can enter the same slow pool, become clear for a moment, and then move on without needing to be held. The overflow returns to the main channel lower down. As we rejoin the stream, the sound grows fuller again, but our pace remains soft. The Hardanger high moorland stretches around us in muted colors, with no sharp boundary between water and land. Wet patches shine, dry patches are only less wet. Stone rises through moss, and snow lingers in shaded folds. In the distance, a long shallow ridge holds patches of remaining white. The ridge guides melt water down both sides, feeding separate channels that may meet far below. Divides like this can be subtle on high moorland. A small rise decides whether water goes one way or another, and that decision may send it toward different valleys, different lakes, or different branches of a larger river system. There is humility in that. A slight tilt in the ground can shape a long journey. A snowflake resting on one side of a ridge may eventually become part of a different stream than one resting only steps away. Yet at the beginning, both are simply snow on quiet land. The Hardanger high moorland holds these beginnings without ceremony. We follow the main stream toward a place where it widens over a gravel bar. The current divides into shallow ribbons, each one clear enough to show tiny grains shifting along the bed. You may imagine kneeling close and watching the smallest movements. A grain lifted, carried a hand's breadth, and set down again. This is how landscapes are written when the handwriting is water. The gravel bar changes from season to season. Stronger melt can rearrange it, while gentler flow refines its surface. Larger stones remain where the water cannot easily move them. Smaller grains gather in quieter lanes. The shape you see today is temporary, but not meaningless. It is the current expression of every recent thaw, every pulse of snowmelt, every pause in flow. Temporary forms can be restful, because they do not ask to be permanent. The ripple marks in fine sand, the thin channels across gravel, the wet shine on stone, all of them are allowed to be enough for now. You are allowed the same. You do not have to become fixed. You can be like water crossing a bar, shaped by the moment and still part of something older. The stream leaves the gravel and enters another shallow lake. This one is longer than the first, held between low slopes, with snowfields reflected in its quiet surface. The inflow spreads cloudy for a moment, where fine sediment enters. Then the particles begin their slow descent. The rest of the lake remains dark and calm, touched only by the light wind. Lakes like this act as settling places in the moorland's water system. Snowmelt enters with mineral grains, organic fragments, and cold from the slopes. In still water, much of the suspended material falls out, laying down thin deposits on the bottom. The outflow may leave clearer than the inflow. The lake, in its quiet way, edits the stream. We move along the shore rather than across the water. The ground is soft, and the edge is irregular, with little bays where moss meets the lake in saturated mats. You can smell cold fresh water and damp plants. Small waves touch the stones with a sound like cloth being folded. The lake holds the wide sky so completely that it seems like a second moorland below us, darker and without wind. On the far shore, a snow patch reaches almost to the water. Melt trickles down from it in several pale threads. The lake receives them without changing expression. This receiving is part of its work, and perhaps part of its peace. It does not hurry the inflow toward the outlet. It lets water widen, deepen, cool, and become still before continuing. You may feel that same widening inside your chest. The day's narrow concerns spread out and lose their edges. Thoughts that were moving quickly begin to settle. Some sink, some dissolve. Some remain visible for a while, like pale sediment in water, and then they too drift downward. The Hardanger high moorland gives us this image without effort. At the lake's outlet, water gathers again into a channel. It leaves quietly, slipping over a lip of stone worn smooth by many seasons. The outflow is clear and cold, and it carries the lake's calm with it for a short distance. We follow, noticing how the sound changes from lapping shore to running stream. The transition is gentle enough that sleep could pass through it. The channel below the outlet crosses bedrock, polished in places by old movement and weather. Modern snowmelt uses the surface differently from ancient ice, but the relationship is continuous in feeling. Ice once moved slowly over upland stone. Now water moves over it in seasonal pulses. Both respond to gravity. Both remember cold. Both leave the rock a little changed. You can run your imagination over the stone's surface. It is smooth in one place, fractured in another, roughened by mineral grains and lichen at the edge. Water follows every slight hollow. Where it is shallow, it makes a transparent skin over grey rock. Where it deepens, it turns greenish or brown, depending on the bottom and the light. Nothing in the color is loud. The stream descends by a series of low steps. At each step, the water folds over and gathers itself below. The sound is soft but continuous, like breathing heard from another room. Spray darkens nearby mosses. The air grows cooler in the small hollows where water lingers after each fall. You feel the moorland's elevation in that coolness, the nearness of snow even in melt season. These steps can form where resistant layers or fractures in the bedrock guide erosion. Water exploits weaknesses, but slowly, and the hard rock remains as shelves and lips. Over time, frost breaks pieces away, meltwater removes loosened fragments, and the stream adjusts its path. The result is not dramatic, but it has a quiet architecture. The land is built of patient thresholds. We pass each threshold with the stream. There is no need to count them. One low fall becomes a pool. One pool becomes a run. One run becomes a shallow bend around stone. The sequence is soothing because it repeats without becoming identical. You know the movement now, and still each place has its own small scent, sound, and color. The Hardanger high moorland at evening feels especially broad. Shadows gather first in the hollows and under boulders, while the higher snow patches keep a dim light. The air cools at the wrists and cheeks. Water seems louder when the wind drops. You can hear individual trickles on the far slope, each one released from snow that has been holding its silence for months. We turn our attention to that far slope. It is not steep, but it is patterned with water. Lines of melt descend through grass and moss, sometimes in clear channels, sometimes as wet sheen across the surface. Where the slope is saturated, the ground may sag and creep almost imperceptibly over time. Where it is rockier, water collects in cracks and loosens fragments with the help of frost. This combination of slope, water, and cold gives the moorland much of its subtle texture. Smooth from a distance, it becomes intricate nearby. You see little terraces, damp swales, stone clusters, and rounded lobes of soil. Each has a history of freezing, thawing, saturation, and release. The processes are scientific, but the experience of them is sensory first. You feel them through the soles of imagined feet. A low mist begins to form over one of the wet hollows. It lies close to the ground, thin enough to see through, and it softens the line between moss and air. Snowmelt has cooled the surface, and evening lowers the temperature further. Moist air condenses into a veil. The moorland seems to exhale, slowly and without sound. Mist changes distance. A boulder that was clear becomes a darker shape. A stream glimmer appears and disappears as the air moves. The far ridge withdraws a little. You remain close to the water beside us, close to the smell of wet peat and stone, close to the steady current. The world grows smaller in a comforting way, though the moorland is still wide around you. We keep descending with the stream, but the descent is slight. On high moorland, downward movement can feel horizontal for a long time because the land spreads broadly before it drops toward deeper valleys. This long, gentle grade gives snowmelt time to linger. It can soak, braid, pool, and settle instead of rushing away. The shape of the land slows the season into presence. That slowing is one reason the Hardanger high moorland feels contemplative. Water does not simply pass through. It dwells. It brightens the stones, feeds the moss, fills the lakes, cools the hollows, and carries fine earth from one resting place to another. Every part of the upland has some relationship with melt. Even the drier ridges are defined partly by where water does not stay. We cross another small wetland, though in the script of sleep, crossing means only drifting in attention. The surface is springy and saturated, with narrow runnels hidden among mosses. A pool reflects the pale underside of cloud. Around it, cotton grass may lift soft white heads in season, moving slightly in the wind. Their motion is so light that it seems borrowed from mist. Wetlands store water and release it slowly. In doing so, they soften the force of melt pulses and help keep downstream flow more even. They also store carbon in the form of partially decayed plant matter, preserved by cool, wet conditions. Yet here, beside the pool, you do not need the scale of those functions first. You simply feel the softness under the landscape's skin. The water in the runnels is brownish in places, tinted by organic matter from peat and plants. In other places, it is perfectly clear, showing pale sand or dark mud beneath. The smell is deeper here, more vegetal, but still clean in the cold air. You may hear a faint sucking sound where water moves through moss, then the brighter note of a small channel leaving the wetland. The Hardanger high moorland holds contrast gently. Clear stone streams and dark peat pools exist only a few steps apart. Snow patches and green moss touch at their edges. Dry lichen crusts grow near saturated hollows. The land does not separate these things sharply. It lets them blend by moisture, slope, exposure, and time. We follow the channel, leaving the wetland. It is narrow at first, then gathers from another seep and becomes more defined. The banks are lined with low vegetation, and the water carries little fragments of plant matter in slow rotation behind stones. You can watch one piece circle, pause, and move onward. Even the smallest drift has patience in it. A soft rain begins, or perhaps it is only mist thickening into droplets. It touches the surface of the stream in tiny rings. It beads on lichen and darkens the stones. Rain and snow melt mingle without distinction, one arriving from cloud, one from the stored cloud of winter. For the land, both are water, but their timing and temperature give them different roles. Spring rain falling on snow can increase melt, while cool rain may simply darken the surface and then freeze again later. Warmth, wind, humidity, and sunlight all take part in deciding how quickly snow becomes water. The process is more complex than it appears, but you can feel its simplicity here. Cold white cover softening into clear movement under a dim sky. We move beside the stream as the droplets continue. The sound becomes fuller, not louder in a startling way, but more textured. Water from above meets water from below. The surface of pools trembles. The scent of wet stone rises more strongly. The Hardanger high moorland seems to draw inward, wrapped in rain, snowmelt, moss, and low cloud. There is no horizon for a moment, only near things. The stream at your side, the dark stone ahead, the snow patch dissolving at its lower edge, the small plants shining with water. When the world becomes this close, sleep often comes nearer too. It is easier to let go when there is no far distance demanding attention. The rain passes gently, or perhaps we pass through the place where it was falling. The air remains damp, and the clouds lift enough to reveal the wider moorland again. Everything looks rinsed. The stream carries a little more water, and the wet channels across the flat have brightened. Snowmelt is not alone now, but it remains the guiding presence, the stored winter continuing to move. We approach a broader valley-like hollow, shallow but unmistakable. Several streams enter from different sides, and the ground between them is a mosaic of wet meadow, exposed stone, and low shrub. This kind of gathering place helps reveal the structure of the upland. Water shows the low lines. It points to the easiest paths. It makes the hidden geometry of the Hardanger high moorland visible. At the center of the hollow, the channels braid and rejoin. During peak melt, the whole floor may carry shallow water in places, while later in the season the flow withdraws into fewer threads. Plants adapted to periodic wetness occupy the margins. Stones emerge as small islands. Fine sediment settles where flow slows behind them. The hollow is a conversation between water levels. You can imagine arriving here in different weeks of the same year. Early on, snow might still fill the shaded sides, and the streams would be cold and lively. Later, the snow would retreat to small patches, and the channels would narrow. Later still, the wetland plants would stand taller in the softened ground. The place is the same, but its voice changes with the melt. For tonight, we keep it in the gentle time between snow and summer. The air is cool, the water is clear, the land has woken but has not become dry. Everything shines faintly. Your body, listening, can take on that same in-between state, not fully alert, not yet fully asleep, but drifting toward a quieter depth. The main channel leaves the hollow through a notch between two low rock shoulders. Here the sound gathers again, echoing softly between the stones. The water moves a little faster, and the bed becomes coarser. Larger fragments remain where the current has washed fine material away. The channel feels clean and spare, like a sentence with only necessary words. Coarser beds can indicate stronger flow at times, because small particles are more easily carried onward. During heavy melt, water may have enough energy to move gravel and small stones, reshaping the channel floor. During lower flow, the stream threads between them, revealing what the stronger season arranged. You see the aftermath without any drama, only order left by movement. We follow through the notch and into another open stretch. The moorland lowers almost imperceptibly, and far ahead, the land seems to fall away toward country we will not hurry to reach. The snowmelt here is still upland water, still close to the snowfields and wet hollows that made it. But every meter carries it toward larger systems, toward valley rivers, toward fjords below the high plateau. That long connection is part of the quiet beauty of the Hardanger high moorland. The water beside us began in silence under snow. It crossed moss, stone, peat, and lake. It gathered from hidden seeps and visible channels. Eventually, it will leave this open height, but it will carry the moorland's cold clarity with it for a while. Landscapes travel inside water. You can rest with that thought. The place does not end at its visible edge. It continues in flow, in sediment, in dissolved minerals, in the timing of spring runoff, in the chill that enters downstream streams and lakes. Yet here, where we are, everything remains immediate. A ripple touches a stone. A drop falls from moss. A late snowpatch loosens one more thread. As the evening deepens, the colors become more subdued. Greens turn darker. Grays become blue. The remaining snow holds a faint inner brightness, and the water reflects what little light is left. The air has the cool softness that comes before night in open country. You may feel it around your hands and forehead, a clean chill that makes blankets feel nearer. We settle beside a pool formed below a small rock lip. The stream enters from above, folds into the pool, circles once, and leaves through a narrow gap. Foam is almost absent, only a few pale flecks caught briefly along the edge. The surface alternates between rippled and smooth. When smooth, it holds the dim sky. When rippled, it breaks the sky into silver pieces. Pools like this can shelter aquatic life from the strongest current. They also trap sediment and organic matter, at least until the next stronger flow clears them. Their form changes slowly as water erodes the lip, deepens the basin, or fills part of it with transported material. Tonight, though, it is simply a resting place. The science can soften into sensation. You are beside the pool, and the Hardanger high moorland is quiet around you. The stream's voice repeats in low phrases. The smell of wet stone comes and goes with the breeze. A few insects move near the water, small dark points against the pale surface. The pool does not hold them long in attention. It lets them pass. We remain there long enough for the idea of time to loosen. Snowmelt is seasonal, but its shaping work belongs to durations much longer than a single year. The ground beneath us has known cold, pressure, thaw, flow, and stillness beyond ordinary counting. Yet the present moment is only this: water entering, circling, leaving. That is enough for the mind to rest upon. When we move again, we do so by following the outflow. It slips through the gap and spreads briefly over flat stone, where the current is so thin that it shows every ripple in the rock. Then it gathers into a narrow run. The sound becomes a fine, continuous thread. Ahead, the moorland is dim, and the water seems to lead by touch rather than sight. The shapes around us are less distinct now. A boulder becomes a dark mass. A snow patch becomes a pale calmness on the slope. The channels are traced more by sound than by shine. This is still the same landscape, but evening has lowered the detail. You do not need to hold all of it. You can let the stream choose what remains. Under low light, the wet places keep a faint glow. They reflect the sky even when the dry ground has gone matte and shadowed. In this way, snowmelt leaves visible pathways into dusk. You can follow the dim ribbons across the moorland, from pool to runnel to stream, as though the land were remembering daylight through water. The Hardanger high moorland is often described by its openness, but openness does not mean exposure in the restless sense. Tonight it feels like spacious shelter. There are no walls, yet the low cloud, the damp air, and the surrounding slopes create a soft enclosure. The sound of water gives the space a center. You are held by what is wide. We pass another snowbed at the base of a slope. Its surface has hardened slightly in the evening cold, but beneath the edge, melt still moves. You hear it before you see it, a hollow trickle under the white. The water emerges through a small tunnel, clear and quick, then slows when it meets the moss below. Winter is still speaking from inside the snow. Such snowbed tunnels can change from day to day. As melt increases, they widen. As cold returns, their surfaces harden. Some collapse softly when the supporting snow thins. Others remain hidden until the snowbank retreats completely. The water inside them is protected from wind and sun, moving in a dim space between stored winter and thawed ground. You can imagine the inside of that little tunnel, not as a place to enter, but as a quiet thought. Blue-white snow above, dark earth below, water sliding through the narrow middle, a faint light at the opening. The image is small, but it carries the whole process of the moorland. Cold becoming movement, cover becoming release, silence becoming sound. The stream from the snowbed joins our channel, and together they move into a shallow, stony run. The water is now a little colder, and the air near it feels fresh against the face. We keep close, guided by the murmur. The land around us slopes gently downward. The darkness gathers without hurry. As night approaches, temperatures may fall enough to slow melting at the snow surface. The day's water continues downstream, but the source quiets for a while. This daily rhythm gives meltwater streams a pulse, often stronger after warmth and weaker in the colder hours. Even within one day, the moorland breathes. The snow releases, rests, and releases again. You may feel yourself entering that rhythm too. A thought rises, then rests. A breath deepens, then releases. The body cools at the edges and warms under cover. The stream continues beside you, but it no longer asks to be followed with careful attention. It can become background now, a steady guide through the open dark. We are still on the Hardanger high moorland, still with snowmelt, still within the wide patience of water and stone. The specific shapes around us have changed many times, from snow edge to basin, from wetland to lake, from seep to stream. Yet the feeling has remained continuous. Everything descends softly. Everything returns to flow. The channel ahead turns around a low knoll thick with moss and lichen. On the outer bend, water has washed the bank clean. On the inner bend, a small crescent of sand has gathered. The bend is modest, but it reveals a basic principle. Water moving around a curve can erode more on one side and deposit on the other, making the channel shift slowly over time. Here, that shifting is restrained by vegetation, stones, and the relatively shallow flow. The stream does not wander wildly. It adjusts. It tests the bank during high melt, leaves a little sand where the current slows, and returns the next season to continue the conversation. You can see the curve as a resting gesture, the water leaning around the land. We pause at the inner crescent of sand. Its surface is damp and smooth, marked by tiny lines where the water has drawn back. A single pebble rests near the edge, with a faint wake of sediment behind it. The detail is so small that waking life might pass over it. Here, in the slow script, it is large enough to hold the mind. Fine sand on a high moorland streambank tells of transport and pause. It may have come from weathered rock, from glacial deposits reworked by water, or from soil loosened by frost and flow. Snowmelt lifted it, carried it, and set it down where the current weakened. The grain is ordinary. Its journey is not. Nothing in the landscape is truly without history. The night air continues to cool. You smell more water now than plants, more stone than soil. The stream seems clearer in the dark because sound has become its main shape. It runs past the sand crescent, under an overhanging mat of moss, and into a narrow passage between rocks. We follow by listening. The passage is shadowed and damp. Water touches both sides, making the stones shine. Above, the moss forms a low green lip, though in the dimness it appears nearly black. The sound here is close, enclosed and steady. You might imagine it as the moorland's quiet pulse, drawn into a small place so it can be heard more clearly. When the stream leaves the passage, it enters another pool, darker than the last because the sky has deepened. A faint line of pale cloud remains reflected on the surface. The rest is a soft liquid grey. Snowmelt enters at one end and leaves at the other, but the pool itself seems still. It holds movement inside stillness, as sleep holds breathing inside rest. We stay with that pool for several breaths. Cold water, dark stone, moss at the edge, the slight pressure of damp air around you. These sensations are simple and repeated, and they ask very little. The Hardanger high moorland is no longer a wide view now. It is this pool, this current, this cooling evening, and the unseen snow still melting somewhere above. The stream below the pool grows quieter for a while because the slope eases. Water spreads across a flat bed of stones, barely covering them in places. The current becomes a thin skin, moving with such smoothness that the stones seem to lie under glass. If you watched long enough, you would see tiny bubbles drift across and vanish at the lower edge. Shallow sheet flow can be important during snowmelt, especially where water spreads over rock or saturated ground before finding a deeper channel. It wets a broad surface, loosens fine particles, and connects small depressions. Later, as flow lessens, the water withdraws, leaving dampness, sediment films, and refreshed mosses behind. The process is delicate, but widespread. You can feel the delicacy in the way the water covers the stones. It does not hide them. It reveals them differently. Edges soften under reflection. Colors deepen. The motion bends light across the rock, making the surface appear to breathe. This is one of the quiet gifts of meltwater. It lets solid things look fluid for a while. Farther on, the sheet gathers again into three narrow threads. They run side by side, separated by low ridges of stone and moss. Each thread has a slightly different sound. One is bright over gravel. One is nearly silent through peat. One clicks softly around small angular rocks. Together they make a low woven music that follows us into the deepening dusk. The woven channels remind us that the moorland is shaped by distribution as much as by force. Water spread across many small roots can sustain broad wet areas and influence plant communities over a large surface. Concentrated flow cuts more clearly. Diffuse flow soaks and softens. Snowmelt uses both, often within the same few steps of land. We keep drifting with the threads until they merge into a final narrow stream for this stretch. It bends toward a dark tarn ahead, a small lake set low in the moor, like a held breath. The tarn's surface is almost black now, though the remaining sky gives it a faint sheen. Snowmelt enters with a silver line. The tarn receives it without a ripple beyond the mouth. Tarns on the Hardanger high moorland can feel like eyes of water, open to the sky and set among stone, moss, and low vegetation. Their basins may be shaped by ice, rock structure, and later sedimentation. Snowmelt keeps them renewed, especially after long winters. They hold cold well. They hold silence even better. We sit in attention at the inlet. The incoming stream fans out slightly, and any suspended grains begin to settle as the current loses strength. Under the dark surface, a small delta may be forming, almost invisible, built from repeated melt seasons. It grows by minute additions. The tarn does not announce it. The land does not need announcements. This is how snowmelt shapes in darkness, as well as in daylight. Water continues to move when no one watches. Sediment settles under night, banks soak, pools fill, cold enters the deeper water. The moorland's work does not depend on attention, yet giving it attention can calm the mind, because the work is so steady and unhurried. Across the tarn, a remaining snow patch lies in a hollow and reflects faintly. It is distant, but you can imagine its melt entering another channel, moving toward the same basin by a route hidden from us. The Hardanger high moorland is full of unseen arrivals. Water comes from behind stones, under snow, through moss, and out of slopes. The visible stream is only part of the story. You may let that be restful too. Not everything has to be visible to be working. Not every movement has to be known. In the darkening upland, water continues through hidden places, and the landscape remains whole. Your own quiet processes can continue beneath awareness, mending and sorting in their own time, while the surface grows still. The Tarns outlet is at the lower side, where water slips between two stones. We follow it only after lingering long enough for the darkness to settle. The outflow is narrow and smooth, carrying the Tarns calm into the next channel. It makes almost no sound at first, then the bed steepens slightly, and the murmur returns, low and familiar. By now, the moorland feels less like a view, and more like a rhythm. Snow, melt, seep, stream, pool, lake, outlet and stream again. Each form leads to another, and none is separate from the rest. The Hardanger high moorland has been shaped by this cycle through countless returns of cold and thaw, and tonight we move through it, as slowly as listening allows. The channel below the tarn winds through a darker wet meadow. The plants are indistinct, but their surfaces hold droplets that catch occasional light. The ground would be soft here, and the air smells of peat, cold water, and faint green growth. Somewhere nearby, a small hidden runnel joins from the side, adding a tone so slight you notice it only after it has become part of the whole. Snowmelt's influence on vegetation is especially clear in these wet meadows. Where water remains, plants suited to saturated soil can persist. Where snow lingers, the growing season may be shorter, but moisture more reliable. Where ridges dry earlier, lichens and low shrubs may dominate. The pattern of plants becomes a living map of water's timing. You start to notice this map more gently now. A darker green line follows a seep. Pale lichen marks a drier stone. Sedges gather in a shallow swale. Moss thickens beside a channel that may run strongest in spring. The land is not randomly colored. It is stained by water, light, cold, and exposure, each one leaving a soft signature. We continue, and the meadow narrows. The stream enters a shallow trough where the banks rise only a little, enough to shelter the water from wind. In the trough, the sound becomes smoother. The surface reflects less sky and more darkness from the banks. Your attention lowers with it. The high open world now feels close and inward. This trough may have been deepened by repeated flow, aided by frost-loosening material from its sides. It may also follow an older line in the terrain, inherited from processes much larger and older than the stream itself. Snowmelt is not the only sculptor here, but it is the recurring one we can hear tonight. It is the present tense of the landscape. The present tense is cold water moving through dim moss. It is a bank holding for another season. It is a snow patch releasing its last drops after sunset. It is a pool darkening under cloud. You do not need to reach the end of the stream to understand it. You only need to remain beside it long enough for its pace to become yours. The trough opens into a stony fan where the stream spreads again, losing definition across a gentle slope. This fan may receive small deposits during stronger melt, as water slows and drops part of its load. Tonight, the flow is light, divided among several shallow strands. Each strand glimmers briefly, then disappears among stones, before rejoining lower down. Fans are places of transition. A confined channel releases into a broader surface, and the water's energy changes. Sediment that could be carried in the narrow run may settle when the flow spreads. Over many seasons, this can build a subtle sloping surface of gravel, sand, and finer material. On the Hardanger high moorland, even these fans are modest. Softened by vegetation and time, we cross the fan in attention, following the brightest strand. It runs over small stones, each one dark and wet. The water is thin enough that it breaks into little wrinkles where the bed is uneven. Those wrinkles catch the last light. The rest of the fan lies quiet, mottled with moss and shadow. The air is almost still. At the lower edge, the strands reunite and enter a long, slow run. The stream here is quiet enough to reflect the first suggestion of night. Clouds hang low, and the snow patches have become pale, indistinct shapes. The Hardanger high moorland does not vanish in darkness. It simplifies. It becomes water sound, cool air, wet earth, and the soft outline of land. We move beside the slow run, and the story of Snowmelt continues without needing to grow larger. A drop leaves snow, a thread enters moss, a channel gathers, a pool settles, a lake holds, a stream moves on. The same pattern repeats at many scales, from the smallest hollow to the broad drainage of the upland. Repetition is not emptiness here, it is comfort. The bed of the slow run is lined with fine sediment in places. Your eye can still make out pale patches beneath the dark water. These fine deposits settle where current remains gentle, creating smoother habitat for certain organisms, while coarser stones support others. Diversity in flow creates diversity in living spaces. Even in a landscape that looks spare from far away, small creatures do not need drama to live fully. They cling, drift, feed, hide, emerge, and return to the water's cycle. Their lives are timed by cold and thaw, by light and flow, by the chemistry that snowmelt brings from stone and soil. We do not disturb them. We only let the thought of their quiet activity deepen the sense that the moorland is awake beneath its calm. A slight breeze returns. It moves over the stream and breaks the reflection into soft fragments. The wet meadow shivers, barely. The smell of water lifts again, carrying a trace of snow from the higher slopes. You can feel how the whole upland is connected by temperature. Cold travels in water, in air, in stone, and in memory. The stream bends toward another set of rocks, and the sound grows more textured. Here, water passes under a natural bridge of lodged stones and moss, then emerges in a narrow silver line. The passage is small, but it concentrates the flow. It has probably changed many times, as stones shift during stronger melt and settle again afterward. Tonight it is stable enough to sing softly. We listen at the outlet. The water appears from darkness, smooth for an instant, then rippled. It carries no sense of where it has just been, only the fact of arrival. That can be soothing. You do not need to know every hidden route that brought you here. You are here, beside cold water on the Hardanger high moorland, and the night is gentle. Downstream, the land opens into one more shallow basin. This one is nearly filled with wet vegetation, and the stream threads through it in a winding path. The current slows so much that the surface sometimes looks still. Droplets cling to sedge tips. Dark pools lie between mats of moss. The basin feels like a place where water rests before choosing a narrower way again. Basins like this can trap sediment and organic matter, gradually becoming more vegetated over time. Snowmelt feeds them, disturbs them, refreshes them, and sometimes floods them. They are not static wetlands, but slow-changing forms in a living hydrological system. Their surfaces may seem soft, but their history is layered and persistent. The land is gentle, not fragile in the simple sense. You can rest your attention on the winding path of the stream through the basin. It curves left, then right, then disappears behind a low tuft of grass, then reappears in a small gleam. Each disappearance is brief and calm. Each reappearance asks nothing. The water knows where it is going, even when you cannot see it for a few moments. The Hardanger high moorland has many such moments, where process continues out of sight. Snow melts beneath the surface. Water moves under moss. Soil creeps too slowly to watch. Sediment settles below dark water. Roots grow in saturated ground. Frost waits for another season. The visible landscape is only the upper page of a much longer text. We remain with the basin until the stream leaves it through a low channel at the far end. The outflow is darker now, shaded by banks and the coming night. Its sound is muted. The air above it feels especially cool. and you might imagine a thin ground mist forming again, where cold water chills the damp meadow. Everything is slowing towards sleep. The channel beyond the basin runs straight for a short distance, guided by a shallow groove in the bedrock. This straightness feels peaceful after the winding wetland. Water moves in a calm line, not fast, but certain. The rock beneath it is old, and the flow above it is new. Between them lies the whole character of the moorland, ancient surface and seasonal brightness together. Even bedrock that seems immovable participates in the snowmelt story. Chemical weathering may be slow in cold uplands, but water still dissolves small amounts of minerals as it passes. Physical weathering breaks the stone into grains and fragments. Meltwater transports some of these materials away. Over long periods, such small actions help renew the surface of the land. You do not need to hold the scale of that time too tightly. It is enough to feel the contrast between your warm breath and the cold stream, between the brief evening and the ancient rock. The mind often softens when it meets something much older than itself. The pressure to hurry becomes unnecessary. Stone has time. Water has returned. Ahead, the straight groove leads into a cluster of shallow pools stepped down the slope. The first pool spills into the second by a narrow lip. The second seeps through moss into the third. The third releases a small run that disappears among stones. We follow each one in order, though slowly enough that order itself feels almost unimportant. The pools are dark mirrors now. Their edges are soft with moss, and the surrounding stones hold a damp sheen. A late drop falls from a bank into the nearest surface, sending rings outward until they reach the edges and fade. The sound is tiny, but in the quiet, it is complete. Snowmelt has become a lullaby of small arrivals. In the first pool, water entering from the groove still has enough motion to make the surface tremble. In the second, it slows and clears. In the third, it is almost still before seeping away. These differences occur within a few steps, but they create different microhabitats, different sediment patterns, different temperatures. The moorland is subtle because it works in such close variations. You can feel your own thoughts passing through similar pools. Some arrive with motion, some settle, some seep away without a clear edge. The Hardanger high moorland does not explain this to you. It simply offers forms that the body understands. Water becomes rest by slowing, not by stopping all at once. The run below the pools is nearly hidden among stones. We follow its sound, a low trickle under the dark shapes. Every so often, the water appears in a small opening and reflects a thread of sky. Then it vanishes again. The hidden and visible alternate like breathing under a blanket, warm breath within, cool air without. This understone flow can keep water cool and protected. It also allows meltwater to move through coarse material without forming a continuous open channel. Fine sediment may be flushed from these spaces during stronger flow, while organic matter catches in quieter pockets. To the eye, the surface looks still. Beneath it, the drainage continues. We do not need to uncover it. We let it remain hidden. There is a deep kindness in not requiring every quiet thing to be brought into the open. The stream can move under stone. Sleep can move under thought. The moorland can shape itself under cloud and snow, whether or not anyone is watching. Eventually, the hidden run emerges into a narrow channel again. The water is darker now, not because it is less clear, but because the sky above has dimmed. It slips between banks of moss, carrying the last light in thin, broken pieces. We are still moving downward, still following Snowmelt, but the descent has become mostly inward. The Hardanger high moorland around us holds its night gently. There are no harsh edges in the view. Snow patches glow faintly. Wet stones shine. The slopes are broad shadows. The stream remains the clearest presence because it has a voice. You can let that voice be the thread you hold while the rest of the landscape loosens. In the quiet, it is easy to sense how Snowmelt links the seasons. Winter stores water high on the land. Spring releases it. Summer depends on the moisture that remains. Autumn cools the ground again. Then snow returns, covering channels, sealing pools, and preparing the next descent of water. The cycle is not a circle you watch from outside. Tonight, you are inside its slow turning. We come to a place where the stream meets a larger dark channel from the left. The joining is soft, only a slight widening and a fuller sound. The new water may have traveled through other basins, over other stones, beneath other snowbeds we have not seen. Now it becomes part of our path. The confluence is quiet, but it deepens everything. At a confluence, waters with different temperatures, sediment loads and chemistries meet. They mix through turbulence, through ripples, through the simple folding of one current into another. The combined stream has more power than either branch alone, especially during melt season. Yet tonight the joining feels gentle, like two slow breaths finding the same rhythm. We stand there in the mind for a little while. The left-hand channel brings a cooler tone. The right-hand channel carries the path we have followed. Together they move onward under the dim sky. The sound is fuller now, but still calm, still low enough to rest inside. The Hardanger high moorland has gathered another part of itself into water. Downstream from the confluence, the banks grow slightly firmer and more defined. The channel curves between low rises where lichens spread over exposed stones. Moss fills the shaded cracks. Small shrubs lean close to the ground. The stream's surface alternates between dark runs and pale ripples, each one fading into the next with no abrupt change. This section reminds you that shaping is not only removal. Snowmelt erodes, but it also nourishes. It transports sediment, but it also deposits it. It cools, but it also awakens. It can disturb a bank during high flow and feed the wet meadow beside it. The landscape is formed by balance, by exchanges repeated so often they become the character of the place. You may feel your breathing becoming more even now. The stream does not need your attention to every detail, but details remain available if you drift back. A stone with a pale rim, a dark pool under the bank, a small thread of water entering from moss, a snow patch far above, barely visible. Each one can hold you for a moment, then let you go. The channel continues into a broadening darkness, where the land begins to slope more decisively toward a distant valley. We will not rush there. We remain with the high moorland while it is still open around us, while snowmelt is still close to its source. The water beside us is beginning to carry more gathered strength, but its origins remain in the quiet white folds behind us. A final lingering light rests on the upper snow. It is not bright enough to cast shadows. It only marks where winter is still present, thinning into the night. From those pale folds, water continues to descend in hidden lines, joining streams like the one beside us. The Hardanger high moorland is still releasing the day, drop by drop. We follow the stream into that release, through cool air and the smell of wet stone, over ground softened by thaw and memory. The channel bends again, and the sound shifts lower as it enters a deeper run. Moss leans over the edge. A few last ripples carry the grey of the sky. The water moves on, and we move with it, slowly, quietly, into the next low place where the snowmelt gathers. This low place is a shallow basin of dark moss and open water, gathered beneath a slope where the snow has withdrawn in uneven arcs. The stream enters quietly, losing its narrow shape as it spreads through a fringe of sedges and submerged stones. You can hear the current soften, as if the water has lowered its voice to match the hollow. The Hardanger high moorland holds this basin like a palm. The air is cooler here, and it seems to rest close to the ground. Dampness rises from the moss in a slow breath, carrying the smell of peat, clean water, and stone that has been wet since morning. A few faint ripples move across the basin where the inflow arrives, then fade into the darker stillness beyond. We pause with them, letting the motion become almost too soft to follow. Snowmelt often uses these low places as temporary rooms. It enters with movement, spreads out, and leaves some of its load behind before continuing downhill. Fine sediment settles first in the still water, while larger grains remain nearer the entering channel. Organic fragments catch among the plants. Year after year, these small deposits alter the basin's floor without changing its peaceful character. You can imagine the basin earlier in the season, still rimmed with heavier snow. Meltwater would have run beneath white edges and filled the hollow with cold overflow. Later, when the snow recedes, the water level drops and the plants stand more clearly. Tonight, we are somewhere between those moments, in the quiet interval when the basin is full enough to shine, but calm enough to sleep beside. The stream leaves through a narrow opening at the lower edge, where moss bends gently over the water. The outflow is darker than the inlet because it has passed through peat and shade. It carries a faint amber tint, not muddy, not clouded, just touched by the organic world it has crossed. The color seems to belong to evening. It gives the water a depth the shallow channel does not truly have. We follow that amber thread into a stretch of ground where the moorland becomes more uneven. Low hummocks rise around shallow pools, and the stream winds between them, as though choosing a careful path through sleeping forms. The hummocks are tufted with moss, grass and low shrubs, their sides damp where meltwater has lingered. In the spaces between them, the ground is saturated and dark, and every hollow holds a small reflection. This hummocky texture can grow from many quiet interactions. Plants trap sediment, water pools between raised patches, freezing and thawing lift, settle, and disturb the soil. Peat forms where wetness slows decay. Snowmelt feeds the whole pattern each spring, entering the low places, refreshing the saturated ground, and keeping the surfaces connected. The result is a landscape that feels softly quilted by cold and water. You move through it only in attention, never pressing your weight into the fragile wetness. The path of the stream is enough. It glints between hummocks, disappears under a small overhang of moss, and reappears in a pool no wider than a sleeping body. The sound is very close now, a hidden murmur from under green edges. It is the kind of sound that makes the mind lean down and grow quiet. Above the hummocks, the slope shows where snowmelt has drawn faint lines through the vegetation. Some lines are bright with running water, others are only damp, marked by darker moss and flattened grass. These lines may change from year to year because meltwater follows the easiest path available, and that path changes when stones shift, plants grow, or last season's sediment closes an old route. The moorland is steady, but its details breathe. The Hardanger high moorland is sometimes broad enough to seem almost motionless. Yet here, beside these little channels, motion is everywhere, only slowed to a scale that does not disturb sleep. Water seeps through moss. The soil settles after thaw. A pebble turns in the current. A snow edge withdraws by the width of a hand. Nothing breaks the quiet, and still nothing is fixed. The stream leaves the hummock field and crosses a low shelf of exposed bedrock. The change is immediate in the sound. Water that was muffled by moss now runs clear over stone, brightening as it passes through shallow grooves. The rock surface is slick and dark. It smells faintly metallic in the damp air, though the scent is softened by cold and distance. Bedrock shelves like this reveal the older strength beneath the moorland's wet skin. Soil may be thin here, and plants cling only where cracks hold moisture. Snow lies across the shelf in winter, and meltwater returns along grooves and fractures every spring. Each line of flow is small, but water gives it definition, cleaning it, darkening it, and perhaps deepening it slightly through time. You can see how the water respects the rock. It does not cover the shelf evenly. It gathers into shallow channels, follows a fracture, spreads over a smooth patch, then narrows again where the surface tilts. Every movement is shaped by what lies beneath. We are watching a quiet collaboration between liquid and stone, between this year's thaw and a much older surface. At the lower end of the shelf, the stream drops into a clear pool with a bed of rounded stones. The fall is only a short fold of water, but it introduces air into the pool, and the surface trembles with pale rings. The stones below gleam in dark colors, brown, gray, and bluish-black. You can almost feel their cold smoothness through the water. Pools below rock steps can deepen when falling water stirs sediment and keeps it moving. The process is modest here, but present. During stronger melt, the current may scour the base of the step more actively, shifting gravel and sand downstream. During gentle flow, the pool rests, holding clear water and the slow movement of small organisms along its edges. The shape is made by both activity and rest. We linger where the pool releases its outflow. It narrows between two stones, then widens again over a bed of small gravel. The water has lost the amber tint for now, becoming glass clear in the rockier channel. Your attention can float with it, passing over each stone without needing to hold any one of them. The eye softens. The breath follows. The Hardanger high moorland begins to open ahead into a long, shallow swale. This swale lies between low rises and collects meltwater from both sides. In spring, it may become a chain of connected pools and slow streams. Later, parts of it may dry at the surface while moisture remains below. Tonight, it is darkly wet, shining in many interrupted lines under the dim sky. We enter the swale with the stream. On the left, a slope still carries a broken stripe of snow in its upper hollow. On the right, wet moss runs down from a seep hidden under stones. Both sides feed the low line where we are moving. The water gathers quietly, not as a single rush, but as many agreements made by gravity, thaw, and shape. The swale is a collector of small decisions, a degree of slope, a patch of late snow, a mat of moss, a stone in the way. Each one changes the path of water slightly. Over many seasons, the slight changes accumulate into a recognizable landform. You can sense this without measuring it. The whole swale feels like a place water knows. As we continue, the ground becomes more saturated. The stream's edges blur into wet meadow, and the current is sometimes hard to separate from standing water. In such places, snowmelt does not only travel, it raises the water table, filling the shallow ground until pools appear between plants. The boundary between surface flow and groundwater becomes soft, and the moorland drinks through its entire skin. The sensation is one of deep quiet. The sound of running water is diffused by moss and sedge. The smell of wet vegetation becomes fuller. The air near the ground is cool and still. You can imagine the softness of the surface without stepping on it, the way it would yield and darken, the way water would gather around a footprint. We leave it undisturbed. A small bird may move somewhere across the swale. Though we hardly see it, a faint call lifts and fades. Life here is present in brief, unshowy ways, appearing and disappearing within the wider hush. The Hardanger high moorland is not silent, because it lacks life. It is quiet because life has learned to fit the wind, the cold, and the short, bright season. Snowmelt helps time that season. It delays some places and nourishes others. A patch released early can green sooner. A snowbed edge may remain bare until later, then bloom in a compressed burst. Wet hollows stay cool, drier ridges warm. This uneven awakening gives the moorland a mosaic of timing, where spring is not a single event but a slow unfolding across many small climates. You can feel that unfolding as we pass through the swale. One hummock seems already awake, with tiny leaves catching water. Another hollow still smells like snow and dark soil. A ridge nearby is pale with lichen, drier under the evening air. Each patch has its own hour. Together, they make the gentle, varied face of the upland. The stream gathers more clearly at the lower end of the swale. Water that was spread among pools and saturated moss finds a defined channel again. Its sound returns as a soft murmur, fuller than before. The channel is narrow, but it has a steady pulse. We let it lead us onward, away from the wet hollow and toward a stonier place. Here, the banks show tiny terraces, only a few inches high, where different water levels have left marks over time. The lowest surfaces are bare and damp. Slightly higher edges hold moss. Above them, low shrubs and grasses grow more thickly. These steps are small records of flow, telling where the water has traveled during stronger melt and where it has rested during quieter days. Such terraces do not need to be grand to matter. They show how repeated seasonal water shapes even the scale of a hand. The stream rises with melt, touches a higher edge, drops sediment, removes soil, then falls back. Plants respond to the moisture and disturbance. The bank becomes a layered margin between water and land. You can read it slowly, like a familiar letter. We follow the terrace line for a while. It curves with the stream, then fades where the bank becomes rock. The water slides close to the stone there, darkening its base and filling a narrow crack with motion. A few small roots hang over the edge, their tips touching the current. They tremble slightly, not from fear, but from contact. The crack in the rock guides the channel for several yards. Water has found a weakness, and the weakness has become a path. In winter, water in such cracks may freeze and widen them. In spring, meltwater returns to carry away loosened grains. The process is not swift, but it is intimate. The stream knows the stone from within its smallest openings. The Hardanger high moorland often reveals itself through these modest relationships. Snow against slope, water through moss, frost inside stone, lichen on boulder, stream against bank. None of these alone explains the whole place, but each one opens a quiet door into it. We move from door to door, never needing to enter loudly. The channel leaves the rock crack and turns toward another lake, larger than the Tarns before, though still held close by the moor. Its surface appears ahead as a long dark band, almost indistinguishable from the sky, until the first ripple catches light. The incoming stream becomes slower as it approaches, spreading into a shallow delta of stones and fine sediment. The lake waits without expression. At the margin, water slides through reeds and sedges, if the season has allowed them enough growth, and into the cold open surface. The transition from stream to lake is one of the moorland's softest changes. Sound thins, motion widens. The current that was a line becomes a faint path under the surface, visible only where ripples carry it forward for a little while. Lakes on high moorlands are shaped by many histories. Some occupy rock basins linked to former ice. Some are held by deposits or thresholds that slow drainage. All are renewed by water from snow, rain, seep, and stream. In the Hardanger high moorland, their surfaces gather the sky, but their bottoms gather the long, quiet work of the surrounding slopes. We settle along the lake's edge. The shore is uneven, alternating between small stones, damp moss, and pockets of dark soil. You can hear small waves, low and unhurried, touching the margin. The water smells clean, with a faint coldness that seems almost scentless until you breathe more slowly. The lake holds a vast quiet in a shallow upland bowl. Sediment entering from the stream begins to fall through the still water. Larger grains settle near the mouth. Finer particles travel farther, then drift down invisibly. Organic matter joins the bottom mud, layering with mineral material. Over time, the lake bed becomes an archive of snowmelt, weather, vegetation, and erosion. Every spring writes another thin line that no one needs to read tonight. The outlet lies far along the shore, but we do not go to it immediately. We stay with the inlet, where the stream's identity dissolves into the lake. There is comfort in watching a form let go of itself. The channel does not end in a hard way. It spreads, quiets, and becomes part of something wider. A thought can do that too. Across the lake, low slopes descend in dark shapes. Snow remains in sheltered pockets, their pale forms reflected in the water when the wind rests. Meltwater from those patches reaches the lake through small channels we cannot hear from here. Each one adds its own cold thread to the basin. The lake gathers them all without needing to separate their names. The Hardanger high moorland feels especially ancient around this water. The rocks have been weathered by cold for so long that their edges seem both firm and softened. The plants are low, adapted to exposure and brevity. The lake itself appears still, yet it participates in seasonal exchange every moment. It receives, stores, cools, settles, and releases. We begin moving along the shore toward the outlet. The path is imagined, careful, always beside the water rather than through the fragile edge. The waves are barely audible. Moss under the low bank shines with droplets. A lichen-covered stone leans half into the lake, its submerged side dark and its upper side pale. Water draws a quiet line between the two. That line shifts with level. During strong melt, the lake may rise, covering more of the shoreline and reaching into plants that now stand above it. During drier periods, the water withdraws, exposing stones and damp sediment. These fluctuations shape the shore community, deciding which plants can tolerate immersion, drying, cold, and ice. The lake edge is a moving boundary, You can feel how boundaries soften at night. Shore and water, snow and stone, stream and lake, waking and sleep, all lose their hard outlines. The world becomes less about division and more about contact. The lake touches the shore. The air touches your face. The sound of water touches the edge of hearing. We continue slowly. At last, the outlet appears as a narrow, dark channel where the lake spills over a low threshold. The water leaving is smoother than the stream's entering, as if the lake has combed the current into calmness. It slips between stones and begins another descent. We follow this outflow now, carrying with us the stillness of the open water. Outlets are important because they translate storage back into motion. The lake has delayed the snowmelt, held it, cooled it, and released it more steadily than a bare slope would. Downstream, this moderated flow shapes channels differently, with fewer sudden pulses in some conditions and more sustained water in others. The moorlands lakes are not interruptions. They are regulators of quiet movement. The outflow stream runs through a narrow meadow, its banks soft and dark. It has a different sound from the inflow, lower and smoother, perhaps because it carries less coarse sediment near the surface. The water reflects the lake behind it for a while, keeping a dark sheen. You can almost sense the widening it has just left, as though the stream remembers being still. We remain close to its edge. The night is not complete, but the light has faded enough that detail arrives slowly. First the water, then the stones, then the moss, then the pale suggestion of snow on distant ground. Your attention no longer moves quickly from one thing to another. It settles on each feature as it appears, then lets it dissolve back into the whole. The stream begins to cut into a gentle slope below the lake. The banks become slightly higher, and the current turns brighter over gravel. Here, the released water has more direction. It carries the cold storage of the lake into a channel that may continue lowering toward valley systems beyond the moor. Yet, the movement remains calm, a descent rather than a departure. The Hardanger high moorland is shaped by such thresholds between storage and release. Snow stores water until warmth frees it. Moss stores water until saturation sends it onward. Lakes store water until outlets lower it. Peat stores water in dark pores. Even stones store cold, giving it back slowly to the air and flow. The whole landscape is a series of quiet holdings. You can let your own body become part of that pattern. The bed holds you. Breath holds and releases. Muscles hold less than before. Thoughts that were tight begin to loosen, not because they are solved, but because the night asks less of them. The stream beside us understands release as a gentle thing. Down the slope, the channel passes through a patch of coarser stones. These may have been deposited by stronger flow, or left from older materials reworked by meltwater. The stream splits around them, forming small chutes and eddies. The sound grows a little more textured, but still low and even. It is like the soft turning of pages in another room. During peak melt, this stony reach may become more active. Water could rise over the tops of the stones, move smaller fragments, and rearrange the bed. Later, when the flow falls, the channel reveals the pattern left behind. Tonight's gentler current explores that pattern. It touches each stone and passes on, making a sound from the shape it has inherited. We watch one eddy behind a rounded rock. A tiny piece of plant matter circles there several times, caught in the slower water. Then a slight change in current releases it, and it slips downstream. The movement is small enough to soothe rather than stir. It reminds you that being held for a while is not the same as being stopped. The stream continues into a quieter reach where the bank is undercut by just a little. Moss overhangs the edge, and drops fall from its tips into the current. Each drop makes a small ring, briefly visible, then gone. The smell here is cool and green. You can almost hear the moisture in the bank, held among roots and peat. Undercutting happens when flowing water removes material at the base of a bank. On this upland stream, the process may be slow and seasonal, limited by roots and stones. frost can loosen the bank in winter. Meltwater can carry away what frost has prepared. Plants then stabilize the edge again. The bank becomes a living negotiation between holding and yielding. The Hardanger high moorland does not present geology and ecology as separate things. The roots affect erosion. The cold affects stone. The stone affects water. Moss, sediment, snow, and slope all belong to one quiet system. As we follow the stream, we are not moving through categories. We are moving through relationships. The channel now bends toward a low ridge, and for a while it runs parallel to it. Snow has lingered on the shaded side of the ridge, though only in broken patches. From each patch, small rivulets descend toward our stream, some visible as silver lines, others hidden under grass. Their additions are slight, but they refresh the current with colder water. You can feel the coolness deepen where one rivulet joins. The air at the confluence seems a little sharper, the sound a little clearer. The joining water carries the freshness of snow that has only recently become liquid. It has not passed through a lake or peat basin. It still has the clean, almost breathless quality of melting ice. Fresh meltwater often has low mineral content at first, depending on its path, but as it travels over and through the landscape, it gathers dissolved ions and fine particles. Contact changes it. Time changes it. The water beside us is already a mixture of many journeys, from snowbed, lake, seep, wetland, and rain. Its clarity contains complexity without displaying it. We move on under the ridge. The snow patches fade behind us, but their water remains in the stream. That is the way of this landscape. Sources disappear from sight, yet continue within the flow. You may not remember every stream we have followed tonight, every basin and shelf and pool, but they have all become part of the quiet we are carrying. The slope below the ridge opens toward a broad area of patterned ground. In the dim light, the patterns are subtle. Stones gathered in faint lines, patches of finer soil between them, low vegetation following the moisture. Freeze and thaw can help sort materials in cold uplands, moving stones and soil into arrangements that seem deliberate. Snowmelt adds the water that makes freezing, thawing, and movement more effective. We do not need to map the patterns fully. We only notice their presence, the sense that the ground has been slowly organized by cold. A stone line runs downslope. A wet strip follows beside it. Moss gathers in the finer material. The stream crosses the lower edge of this pattern and carries away whatever the thaw has loosened enough to move. There is a hush around patterned ground. Perhaps it comes from knowing that such forms develop through repetition beyond ordinary noticing. The land has been thinking in cold cycles. It has been sorting itself grain by grain, lift by lift, thaw by thaw. You stand beside it in imagination, and your own thoughts become less urgent, as though they too could be arranged without force. The stream turns away from the patterned slope and enters a narrow run between mossy banks. This run is smooth, almost silent. The water has a dark polish, broken only where submerged stones lift it into small ripples. The banks are close enough that the channel feels sheltered, though the wider moorland remains open beyond them. We follow the dark line into deeper quiet. Night gathers more fully now. The sky is a dim field of cloud, not black, but low and muted. The snow patches are pale smudges. The stream is known more by touch and sound than by sight. The Hardanger high moorland has become less visual, more inward, and the snowmelt shaping work continues in the unseen margins. As temperatures fall, some surface melting may slow, but the water already released keeps moving downslope. Wet ground releases stored melt. Lakes feed outlets. Peat seeps gradually. The stream's night flow is the result of daytime warmth, seasonal storage, and delayed pathways through the land. This delay is part of the moorland's calm. It keeps the water from being only immediate. You can feel that delay as a comfort. Not everything must happen at once. Snow can wait through winter. Melt can travel under moss. A lake can hold. A seep can release later. The stream can arrive after the sun has gone. The whole system is built on patience, and patience is a good companion for sleep. We come to a small widening where the channel has formed a dark pool against the outside of a bend. The inner side holds a low bar of pale gravel. The The pool is nearly still at its center, with the main current pressing quietly along the far edge. A faint reflection of the sky trembles there. We stop again, because places like this ask for no haste. Bent pools and gravel bars show how a stream handles its own curve. Faster water near the outer bank can deepen the channel, while slower water on the inner side leaves sediment behind. On a large river, this might create broad meanders. Here, on the high moorland, it makes intimate forms, small enough to study by listening. The pool smells of cold water and wet stone. The gravel bar has the pale, clean look of material recently washed. Moss leans over the outer bank, dark and dripping. If you watched in daytime, you might see small shadows moving near the stones. At night, you only sense the life there, quiet under the surface, held by water that began as snow. We leave the bend slowly. The stream straightens and lowers again, passing into a stretch with scattered pools separated by shallow riffles. Each riffle aerates the water gently. Each pool gathers stillness. The alternation gives the channel a rhythm that is almost breath-like, and we let that rhythm carry us without counting its parts. Riffle and pool sequences can arise from variations in bed material, slope, and flow. Coarser stones create shallow, faster sections. Deeper spots form where water scours or where the bed lowers. Snowmelt moving through these sequences distributes oxygen, sediment, and organic matter. It shapes habitat as it shapes sound. The stream becomes a chain of small differences. You hear the riffles as soft brightness, the pools as darker pauses. Your body understands the pattern before any explanation arrives. Movement, rest, a sentence, then a comma, another sentence, and then a longer breath. The Hardanger high moorland speaks this way in water, especially at night when other details fade. The channel passes a low bank where thawed soil has slipped slightly, forming a rounded lobe at the edge. It is subtle, but the curve suggests slow downslope movement. Saturated soil, freeze-thaw cycles, and gravity can work together to shift material over time. Snowmelt supplies water, and water reduces friction, allowing the upper layers to creep. This slow movement is not collapse. It is the land adjusting itself. The lobe may move only a little across many seasons, but the stream will eventually meet it, undercut it, or flow around it. Plants will root in it. Frost will enter it. The shape will change again. We witness it as stillness, though it contains motion too slow for ordinary sight. You may find peace in that hidden motion. The body at rest is not inactive. It heals, sorts, cools, warms, and dreams. The moorland at rest is not inactive either. Water passes under the surface. Soil shifts by tiny measures. Frost prepares future change. Snowmelt carries the season downward, even through night. The stream now enters a region of scattered low shrubs, their branches close to the ground and dark with moisture. They grow in pockets where the soil is deep enough and the exposure tolerable. Meltwater passes among them in small channels, sometimes feeding their roots, sometimes keeping nearby ground too wet for other plants. The pattern is nuanced, and we move through it gently. Leaves hold droplets that reflect the dim sky. When the breeze touches them, a few drops fall into moss with almost no sound. The shrubs do not rise high enough to block the view. They only texture the foreground, softening the banks and giving the stream a sense of shelter. You can smell green wood faintly, mingled with peat and cold water. Vegetation slows flow near the ground. Stems and roots interrupt moving water, trap sediment, and protect soil from being carried away too quickly. At the same time, heavy melt can bend plants, scour around roots, and redistribute organic matter. The relationship is reciprocal and ongoing. On the Hardanger high moorland, even low shrubs take part in shaping water's path. We continue through the shrubbed reach until the channel emerges onto another open stony flat. The sudden openness is gentle, not startling, because the darkness has softened all edges. Water spreads in shallow ribbons across the stones. Some ribbons join quickly. Others wander for several yards before returning. The sound becomes wider and thinner, as if the stream has stretched itself across the night. Open stony flats can form where flow loses confinement and deposits coarse material, or where thin soil over rock leaves little for water to cut. During strong melt, the whole surface may become active with shallow channels. During low flow, only a few threads remain. Tonight, those threads are enough to show the structure of past abundance. You can imagine the flat under full spring melt, bright with water over many lanes, all of them reflecting the sky. Then imagine it later, quieter, with only damp stones marking old paths. The Hardanger high moorland moves between those states every year. It is not one fixed scene, but a breathing surface where water expands and withdraws. We cross the flat with the largest thread. The stones under the water are small, rounded, and closely packed. The current makes a delicate clicking in places, as grains shift or touch. A few larger rocks stand above the flow, wearing pale caps of lichen. Around each one, water curves in smooth lines, then rejoins itself downstream. At the far edge of the flat, the channel narrows suddenly between two bedrock ribs. The water deepens just enough to darken. Its sound lowers. Moss grows thick in the shaded creases of the rock, and small drops hang from it like beads. The passage feels intimate after the spread of the flat, as though the stream has drawn in its breath. Bedrock ribs can guide drainage across uplands, creating narrow controls where water must pass. Such controls influence upstream storage, downstream energy, and sediment movement. Snowmelt interacting with them may pool above, accelerate through, and deposit below. The forms are small here, but the principles are the same as in larger landscapes. Water responds to shape, and shape responds to water. We rest in the sound of the narrow passage. It is steady, enclosed, and low, with no sharp splash. The darkness around the rocks is soft. The stream's surface carries a faint gleam, then loses it, then finds it again where the angle changes. You can follow that gleam as if it were a thread through sleep. Below the ribs, the water enters a long, shallow pool, edged with dark peat. The pool is quiet enough that the incoming current can be seen as a faint movement under the surface. Around the edge, the peat has been cut slightly by seasonal water levels, revealing dark layers of old plant material. The smell is earthy and cold, almost sweet in the dampness. Peat layers build slowly where water keeps oxygen low and decay incomplete. Snowmelt helps maintain that wetness in many upland hollows, especially where drainage is slow. Each year's plant growth adds a little material, and some of it remains. Over long time, the peat becomes a memory of vegetation, climate, and water. Tonight it is simply a dark, soft bank beside a still pool. You can feel the age of it without thinking too hard. The bank is not stone, but it has its own depth of time. Moss became peat. Seasons became layers. Snow became water and kept the layers wet. The pool beside it reflects the dim sky, and the reflection trembles when the stream enters. Everything is old and present at once. The pool's outflow is barely visible at first. Water seeps through a notch in the peat bank, then gathers into a clearer run beyond. We follow that run as it curves away from the pool and toward a darker line of lower ground. The sound returns gradually, first as a whisper, then as a familiar murmur over small stones. The Hardanger high moorland is releasing us into another subtle descent. The ground slopes enough now that the stream keeps a more continuous channel. Wetlands still appear beside it, and small lakes still interrupt its course, but the sense of flow grows stronger. Even so, there is no hurry. The water is only obeying the gentlest pull. As we move downstream, the channel receives another side stream from a snow-fed hollow. This side stream is narrow but very clear, running over pale stones. Its water feels colder in the imagination, and when it joins the main flow, the two currents travel side by side for a short distance before mixing fully. You can see the seam as a faint difference in color and texture. Such mixing can happen gradually when currents enter at similar speeds. Temperature differences, dissolved materials, and suspended particles may create subtle visual changes. In a half-light channel, these differences are mostly felt rather than seen. The water's sound shifts slightly. The surface texture changes. The current becomes a little fuller, and the stream carries on. We continue with the joined flow, and the valley-like hollow deepens by small degrees. The banks are still low, but the land around the channel rises more clearly. Snow patches remain visible on the higher sides, pale and withdrawn. Their melt will take time to reach us, moving through runnels, moss, and small basins before entering the stream. The landscape keeps sending itself downward. This sending is not loss. The snow does not vanish into nothing. It becomes stream, lake, wetland, vapor, plant water, soil moisture, and eventually part of larger waters beyond the moor. The Hardanger high moorland is shaped by the passage, but it also gives itself through that passage. Water leaves, and in leaving it reveals the form of the land. You may let that thought pass softly. There is no need to hold it as meaning. It can be like a leaf in the current, circling once behind a stone, then moving on. The stream is enough, the night is enough. The cool air against your face is enough. We follow the water because following is easier than striving. The channel ahead is lined with larger stones now, and the current slips among them in darker runs. Some stones may have been too heavy for ordinary flow, moved only during stronger melt pulses, or inherited from older deposits. Others remain where frost has loosened them from nearby rock. Snowmelt threads through their arrangement, selecting the smaller material, leaving the larger forms as anchors. Anchors is only a feeling, not a fixed role. Given enough water and time, even larger stones can move, tilt or settle. But tonight they seem still, and their stillness steadies the current's motion. Water gathers against one stone, divides around it, then folds together again. The sound is low and rounded. The whole channel feels heavier, more settled. We pass between the stones, keeping attention on the water's path. A pool forms where several boulders create a sheltered pocket. The surface is nearly black. A thin line of ripples marks the incoming flow, and the outgoing flow slips below a stone lip. In the darkness, the pool seems deeper than it is. It invites the mind to lower itself. Pools among boulders provide shelter from current and can collect organic matter. They may also serve as small temperature refuges, depending on groundwater input, shade, and flow. On cold uplands, microhabitats matter. A slight difference in current or temperature can matter to small organisms. The moorland's quiet complexity is made of such slight differences. We do not need to see the organisms to respect their presence. The pool is not empty because it looks dark. Beneath the surface, small lives continue according to their own rhythms. Along the edges, moss drinks. In the inflow, oxygen enters. In the outflow, fine particles leave. The snowmelt connects them all with a slow, cold hand. The stream leaves the boulder pool and travels across a smoother reach, where the bed is mostly sand and fine gravel. The sound softens again. The current forms gentle ripples, evenly spaced, moving over the pale bottom. These ripples are not waves from wind, but patterns in flowing water shaped by bed and speed. They make the channel look as though it is breathing. Sand beds can be rearranged quickly, compared with rock or boulder beds. During stronger melt, ripples migrate, bars shift, and channels may adjust their position. During quieter flow, the patterns settle into delicate regularity. You can look at them and feel time differently, not as a line, but as a series of soft reformings. The Hardanger high moorland contains both resistant and changeable surfaces. Bedrock holds, sand moves, peat preserves, snow melts, moss grows. Water links them, touching each according to its nature. As we drift beside the stream, we feel that no single pace defines the landscape. It is many paces braided together, all of them slow enough for sleep. A faint mist returns over the sandy reach. It hovers above the water, barely separated from the dark air. The stream seems to pass through its own breath. Your vision softens, and the bank on the far side becomes less distinct. The sound remains clear, and because sight has loosened, the sound feels nearer. We keep following it. Mist often forms when moist air cools near saturated ground and cold water. Snowmelt contributes by lowering surface temperatures and keeping the air close to the ground damp. The result is not merely atmospheric beauty, though it is beautiful. It is another expression of water changing form, from snow to liquid to vapor and suspended droplets, all within the same quiet landscape. The mist curls around low stones and gathers in small depressions. It does not rise far. Above it, the air is a little clearer, and the pale snow patches on distant slopes seem to float. The Hardanger high moorland becomes layered vertically now. Dark water below, mist at the ground, low plants within it, rock and snow beyond. Each layer is soft. We pass through the mist with the stream. It beads on everything, adding moisture to surfaces already damp. Moss darkens, lichen softens in color, stones shine. Your own imagined skin feels cool, not uncomfortably, but in the way a quiet night reminds you of blankets and shelter. The open moorland becomes intimate, almost enclosed by its own breath. The channel bends again, and a small side pool appears in an abandoned curve. It is connected to the main stream only during higher flow, but tonight it rests separately, holding still water and fallen bits of vegetation. Snowmelt likely fills it during peak runoff, refreshing it before the main channel withdraws. Now it is a memory of stronger water. Such side pools can be important temporary habitats. They warm and cool differently from the main channel, gather organic matter, and may dry or reconnect depending on the season. They show how a stream's influence extends beyond its present wetted edge. The channel you see is only one expression of a wider hydrological space. We pause by the side pool. Its surface is smooth, except where a single drop from overhanging moss touches it. The ring expands to the dark edge and disappears. In that small motion, you can sense the pool's isolation and connection at once. It is separate tonight, but shaped by the same melt that moves beside us. The main stream continues beyond the bend, and we return to it without hurry. The water has gathered a slightly fuller body from all the side inputs, but it remains clear and cold. The banks are now a little more continuous, and the channel seems committed to its downward path. Still, every few yards, a seep, pool, or wet margin reminds us that flow is never only one line. The Hardanger high moorland surrounds this channel like a wide sleeping room. The ceiling is cloud, the floor is stone, moss, peat, and water. The walls are distant slopes barely visible in the dimness. There is no closed boundary, yet the atmosphere feels held. We move within it as listeners, guided by a stream that began as snow. A soft hush comes over the wind, and for a few moments the water is the only sound. It passes over gravel, brushes moss, slips beneath a stone, and reappears. That sequence could repeat for miles, with endless variation and no need for surprise. The mind can rest in such repetition because it remains alive without becoming demanding. Repetition is one of Snowmelt's greatest powers. A single thaw might make little difference. Thousands of thaws, spread over seasons and centuries, can shape channels, wetlands, lake shores, and soil movement. The force lies not in suddenness, but in return. The Hardanger high moorland has been changed by water that keeps coming back. You can let your breathing return too, again and again, without making anything happen. Inhale with the gathering snow. Exhale with the stream leaving the basin. Inhale with the lake holding stillness. Exhale with the outlet moving on. The rhythm is not forced. It is offered by the landscape, and you may follow it as lightly as you like. The stream now approaches another low cascade, where water slides over a slanted rock rather than falling freely. The surface forms a smooth, shining tongue, then breaks into small ripples at the bottom. The sound is a continuous whisper, deeper than dripping and softer than rushing. Moss beside the slide is dark and saturated, fed by spray and seepage. Slanted rock slides like this can develop where flow follows a resistant bedrock surface. The water's erosive work may be limited, but it still transports loosened particles and keeps the surface clean. Freeze-thaw may do more of the breaking. while meltwater does more of the carrying. Together, they maintain the smooth channel over which the stream glides tonight. We stay close to the slide. The water's thin surface reflects a pale streak of sky, then wrinkles into darkness below. If you were very near, you would feel cool dampness on your face from the air moving over the water. The sound is even enough to become almost part of your breathing. It asks nothing else. Below the slide, the stream enters a pool with a sandy margin. The sand is darker near the water, lighter where it has begun to dry. Tiny channels cut through it, formed as water receded from a higher level. They look like miniature valleys, each one carrying the same principle as the larger landscape. Water withdraws, and its paths remain for a while. These miniature forms can be brief. A new rise in flow may erase them, a breeze may dry them, another trickle may cut across them. Yet they echo the larger work of snowmelt across the moorland, where channels are made, modified, abandoned, and renewed. Scale changes, but the gestures remain familiar. The Hardanger high moorland seems to repeat itself at many sizes. A small pool resembles a lake. A tiny channel resembles a valley. A sand ripple resembles the slow wave of a slope. A snowbed edge resembles the retreat of a larger winter. This repetition is soothing because the mind recognizes the pattern before needing to analyze it. We leave the sandy margin and follow the main run into a darker, deeper section of channel. Here the banks are close and the water is smooth, reflecting almost no light. The sound becomes low, like a quiet voice heard through a wall. The air is cool and still in the hollow, with the scent of peat stronger than before. This deeper section may have formed where flow remained concentrated over many seasons, perhaps aided by softer material or a structural weakness. Snowmelt pulses would have reached this channel year after year, removing loosened material and maintaining the depth. The bank vegetation holds the edges, while the current keeps the center open. Balance again, repeated and revised. You can let the dark water carry the scene without needing to see into it. Darkness on the moorland is not empty or threatening. It is simply the absence of bright detail, and it lets softer senses come forward. You hear more. You feel the cool air more clearly. You sense the ground's dampness through the atmosphere itself. The channel slowly opens again, and the stream enters a long, wet flat where many thin side channels join from hidden sources. The flat is almost level, and the water moves in quiet, braided lines. Some are no wider than a hand, some are only wet traces under moss. Together, they gather into the main channel, adding their small voices to the flow. Braiding on such a small scale can occur where flow spreads across a low gradient and sediment or vegetation divides the path. During stronger melt, more of the flat may be active. During lower flow, only selected threads remain. The pattern is responsive, changing with water supply, sediment load, and the condition of the ground. It is a living lacework of melt. We move through the lacework slowly. A thread from the left slips under moss. A thread from the right crosses pale gravel. Another emerges from a dark peat pocket, joining the main flow without sound. The Hardanger high moorland here feels woven, not built, as if snowmelt has been threading the same fabric through countless springs. There is an old calm in woven things. They hold because many small strands share the work. The moorland holds water this way. Snowfields, lakes, mosses, peat, stones, channels and plants all share the work of slowing, guiding, and releasing. No single element has to do everything. The system rests in its own distribution. The braided flat gradually narrows into one stream again. The banks become clearer, and the current gains a little speed. We follow beside it, still descending, still keeping to the softness of the night. The stream's surface now carries occasional pale streaks from breaks in the cloud, and each streak lengthens, bends, and disappears as the water passes. Clouds move slowly overhead, though we see them mostly by their reflection. A lighter patch opens in the sky and turns the water silver for a few moments. Then it closes, and the channel darkens again. The snow patches on the slopes respond faintly to the same change. Even in darkness, light remains part of the snowmelt story, because light is what releases winter's stored water. Sunlight warms snow directly, but thaw also depends on air temperature, wind, humidity, and the heat held by rain or ground. The science is intricate, yet the experience is simple. White softens, edges retreat, drops gather, water begins to move. The Hardanger high moorland receives that movement and gives it paths, pauses, and destinations. You can almost hear tomorrow's melt waiting in the snow above us. When morning light returns, the edges may loosen again. New threads will form, perhaps in the same places, perhaps slightly altered. The stream beside us will rise a little or remain steady, depending on warmth and cloud. The landscape will continue its slow conversation with the season. For now, the night flow carries what has already been released. It moves past a cluster of stones, under a low bank, and into another pool. The pool is oval and sheltered, with a dark center and shallow edges. A faint current crosses it diagonally, visible only where it disturbs the reflected cloud. We settle there, gently, as if sitting beside a sleeping eye of water. The pool's edges are lined with fine roots and moss. They hold the bank together while also creating tiny sheltered spaces. Sediment collects among them. Small organisms feed and hide there. During higher melt, the pool may fill to the top of the bank and connect with wet ground beyond. During lower water, it withdraws into its deeper center. We watch the diagonal current enter and leave. It does not disturb the whole pool. It only passes through, carrying the stream's continuity across a place of rest. That image is good for sleep. Movement within stillness, stillness around movement. The Hardanger high moorland offers it again and again, in lakes, pools, wet basins, and slow channels. The outflow of the pool is narrow, and the stream quickens briefly. It crosses a lip of gravel, making a soft rippling sound that brightens the air. Then it slows across another flat reach. The alternation is steady and kind. You do not have to decide whether to follow motion or rest, because the water gives you both. As we continue, the moorland's broader shape becomes harder to see, but easier to feel. We are on a high, cold, open surface shaped by ice long ago and by snowmelt every year. We are following water from snowbed to channel, from wetland to lake, from seep to stream. We are moving through a landscape whose stillness is made of slow circulation. The Hardanger high moorland is not asleep, but it is restful. Its work happens at a pace that does not press on the body. Snow releases slowly, water gathers quietly, stone changes reluctantly, plants grow close to the ground, accepting the brief season without haste. Even the stream, moving downward, seems to know how to be calm. A larger lake lies somewhere below, though we have not reached it yet. The stream is trending toward it, following the low line through the dark. We can sense the approach in the easing slope and the slightly broader channel. The water's sound becomes less broken by stones and more continuous, as if preparing to widen again. We keep with it, unhurried. Before the lake, the stream crosses one last wet meadow. The meadow shines faintly under the low sky, and the channel divides into many shallow curves. Snowmelt has kept this ground damp, perhaps for weeks after nearby ridges began to dry. The plants here grow in close communities, their roots binding the saturated soil and filtering the water as it passes. Filtering is not a mechanical word here, though it can be. It feels more like softening. Water moving through moss and peat loses some of its suspended load, gains organic color, and changes temperature. It is slowed by stems and roots. It emerges altered, not purified in a simple way, but made part of the living wetland before it moves on. You can smell that living wetland in the dark. It is earthy, cool, and faintly sweet, with the mineral clarity of the stream running through it. The sound is dispersed into many channels, so no single line dominates. We drift through this meadow by listening to the whole damp field, not only the main thread. The moorland breathes around us. At the lower edge, the many shallow curves gather into a short outlet that enters the lake ahead. The lake is mostly invisible at first, a deeper darkness beyond the meadow. Then a smooth surface appears, reflecting a pale opening in the clouds. The stream slides into it and becomes quiet. Another widening, another rest, another place where Snowmelt pauses before continuing its long descent. The lake receives the stream so softly that the sound almost disappears at the edge, leaving only the faint touch of water against stones and the cool breath of night over the shore. You can feel the whole surface settling around the inflow, widening the narrow current into darkness, smoothing its small ripples until they belong to the lake. The Hardanger high moorland rests around it, dim and open, with the last snow patches lying pale on the slopes like memories that have not yet melted. The water that entered with a voice now moves without one. It drifts outward under the surface, colder than the lake at first, then slowly becoming part of the same still body. Fine grains begin to fall through the dark water. Tiny fragments of moss and soil sink with them, turning the season into a thin, quiet layer below. Nothing hurries them. The bottom waits as patiently as the snow waited through winter. Along the shore, moss holds the day's moisture. Stones keep a faint chill. The air smells of peat, clean water, and the mineral breath of old rock. You do not need to follow the outlet now. You can stay here, where the stream has widened into rest, and where the moorland's long work grows almost silent beneath the night. Above you, the clouds move slowly, but their motion feels very far away. Around you, the low plants fold into darkness, and the lake reflects only a soft grey remnant of sky. The snowmelt has traveled far enough for tonight. It has left the white slopes, crossed stone and moss, entered pools and hollows, and now it settles into this cold, dark basin without asking to be seen. So you settle with it, beside the quiet water of the Hardanger high moorland, while the last fine grains drift down through the lake, and the night holds everything still.